Thanks, everybody. I know I'm stuck in the worst slot of the day between you and food and beer. I assume there's some drinks. But I am talking about a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart, which is ABI stability. And it wasn't really me who did these talks. Where's the remote? There it is, hiding. All these slides were done by Ray Kinsella at Intel, who has been the person behind all this and the person who did all the recently committed patches to put the ABI stability document into the current release. So if you fall asleep during my slides, just go read what was put into the 1911 release. And I don't work for Intel, so I don't need that slide. So the DPDK has been around for a while. And over its lifetime, it's gone from being a cool idea to a proof of concept to something that was put out by Intel to a few key people to a now thriving open source project. And over that curve, we've gone from technology innovation to people actually using it. And just from personal experience, I've seen several cases of, do you remember the earlier talk today where the guy was talking about problems with containers and he was saying, well, it's solved, but it's solved on 1905, but we can't update. I've heard that story from 3 or 4 different vendors already. And part of my motivation and part of the broader motivation of this is solve that problem. And what does that mean? Those people are out on the yellow end of the curve. They're not the bleeding edge people. The bleeding edge hardware vendors that do the new flow, whatever, they're always going to be changing. The people on the downside, the people we want to adopt are the ones that don't want change. And this is sort of a graph, but it's also a mea culpa slide. So Ray did the research to compare how the DPDK is versus a project of about similar size and maybe older, well, a lot older actually, GStreamer. So GStreamer is a generic infrastructure used to provide video and audio support for lots of other applications. So it's an infrastructure and it's been around a while, and they are 100% compatible between major versions. So all the distros can just package up GStreamer, put it in next release, and your DVD player is still going to work the same way it did before. DPDK has been the other way. There's been at least 8% churn between every major release. The LTS release that's around basically only picks up major changes like the recent CVE. It does not pick up new hardware support. You do not get any new, the classic thing is, I want the LTS release, but I want this new flow feature. We don't do that with the LTS release. Another project that's got a very long history of being stable is the Linux kernel. Linus actually talks about taking applications that he's had, games he's played from 20 years ago and playing it on current kernels, and they still work. Linux has a big advantage in that the syscall boundary is a pretty hard wall between user space and kernel space. We don't really have that in the DPDK, but there's lots of good examples of why having a good stable ABI makes a big difference for applications. So we'd like to make a distinction between API and ABI. API is the thing the programmers worry about, like the calls they make, what's in the headers, what features are there. The ABI is what those compiled applications use from the library. And that's a runtime thing. So if you're using shared libraries, what you'd like to be able to do is put a new version of the shared library in, and nothing breaks. So if I update my laptop and it pulls down a new version of glibc, my editor doesn't break. And we want the same thing with DPDK. In reality, the two of them overlap. So if a developer decides to add new fields to an MBUF to support some extension, that means it changes an API, as in using that, and it changes an ABI because the MBUF got different. So in reality, the two are very much tied closely together. The proposal that started out about, well, probably almost 6 months ago was, can we make the DPDK more stable? And the three key parts were to keep the API stable for 1 year, so only every year would we do breaking changes, and to continue with the policy of marking things that are experimental that might change as experimental. And we'll use a bunch of features like versioning to make sure that those ABIs stay stable over that year without causing big impacts. I'm not going to go into all the details of how we do naming and ABI stability, but there's a couple examples already. There's some good support in the header files. So developers if you need some help, talk to somebody else. It's possible to do it without creating huge impacts. One important thing I want to bring up is that people think, oh, the DPDK they'll be totally stable. No changes will ever happen. Well, there's two things to realize. One, that changes will happen incrementally, as in new additions will still occur over that year. The other one is some things will be out of scope. So, for example, the developer earlier who went and modified how DPDK works with containers, we may break that completely because you did a modified version of DPDK and you expected something different. We're not going to support your modifications. But if you can expect that the Mellanox driver is not going to break if you're using it between releases. The MBUF library is not going to break if you're using it between releases. We will spend time doing things like some of the examples, changing them, getting rid of them. The documentation obviously will get updated as we change APIs. And user tools and scripts, there's been some investment and there's going to be even more in doing a better job on that stuff. So if you're depending on the user tool startup script to have option 34 be set up huge page, it may not be 34 anymore. So making it clear which the boundary is between what's in scope and what's out of scope is really important. So what does this mean? This is the kind of a eye chart about different versions. So the version on the far left is 1911, which everything's looking good. It will be the first one out the door, which has the new 1-year stability guarantee. So over that lifetime until 2011, the ABI will be stable. New symbols will be added and are modified, but the ABI from V20 continues. And then a year from now, we'll declare the next major version and we'll repeat the process. There has been some discussion and no conclusion about making this 1-year window into 2 years or even longer. But this is a new hard change for the developers, and kind of like you don't want to teach your kid make something too hard to start with. 1 year seemed to be the longest lifetime we could commit to. And it wasn't without major discussion back and forth to agree to that. So this process has gone through several reviews. We do it at the tech board at User Space Bordeaux. It was finally merged yesterday or today? I guess this morning. And we have tools to do ABI checks. This is a short slide set. I wanted to get time for enough questions before everybody was out of here to go fill their hungry bellies. So, any questions? totally dead. We did everything perfectly. Everybody commits to doing this stability. It's not hard. I don't think so. Okay, now everybody will take their product and put it on 1911, and I won't have to deal with any more DPDK 16 and 15 stuff.
So Stephen, this is a bit of a loaded question. So we've had this discussion for many years, as you know. What's different this time? The implementation looks more thorough. Ray spent a lot of time on his analysis. Are there, let's call it teeth or penalties or gates in place at the maintainer level, the branch level, et cetera, to stop breakages from happening? Or is it dependent on the community adopting and following the rules, and if they don't, then we're right where we were?
All of the above.
Okay.
So we've already had some discussions about things we've had to say no to or will have to say no to. So people, they're kind of showing up a bit as, we better get this in 1911 because we'll never get this in for the rest of the year. There's also some CI tools to do some testing of this. So, I personally don't trust tests to solve problems.
Right.
They test them, depend on them to discover problems that do exist. So we will probably get some pushback during the CI cycle of
right.
This got broken.
Okay.
And also, I think the renewed attention has taught developers both ways to solve the problems and what to look for.
Right. The one thing I'd say is, you guys heard me this morning talk about the importance of our long-term stable release. That's getting traction. What we have heard from customers across the board into the project is, hey, that's great, but this ABI breakage adds a level of complexity that's also a problem. So I think if we fix this, to your examples on the growth of bigger stable projects, right, this will go a long way to helping all of us continue to grow DPDK and get on a broader, more impactful, more adopted trajectory. So thank you.
I won't be happy until I have somebody say, I went from DPDK 1911 to DPDK 2005 and I saw nothing change.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Like, why should I bother? Nothing changed. Yeah.
Okay.
Over there. Somebody's over there.
So you actually skipped the last slide.
Yeah, so you saw, you wrote that you have support infrastructure to test ABI stability in UNH lab,
Yep.
which is, are you planning to bring up like a DTS test suite or something like this in order to test it, test every release or something?
Hold on, is that a volunteer? Is volunteering?
So we already have a test suite at the UNH lab, and it's testing patches and it's testing new versions. I'm not sure exactly what the ABI stability component is going to look like, but we've raised the issue, and to be honest, that's one of the things we're funding them for.
Yeah, so that's fundamentally, my discussion this morning about, hey, we have this community lab, bravo, the community asked for it, the governing board and the budget committee prioritized it, and now we have these resources. What we need is somebody from this audience and beyond to step up and say, this is great, I'd like to help drive that work to make sure it happens in the lab so we can automate some tools and processes and make it easier for all of us. But that won't happen with nobody raising their hand. And you've heard me say that multiple times, and I will keep saying it until somebody says, yeah, I think I want to help, and then we'll help you help. There's people in here that will help you help. They just aren't in a position today where they can do it all on their own. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for someone who may be new into the community, really wants to sort of build a reputation for themselves as adding value in an open source manner. I encourage you to raise your hand and step up.
I want to mention one more thing, because today we already have a DTS test suite. As some of the tests are generic, they can run actually on any hardware, but the fact is that only if you register and send your own hardware and your own platform to the community lab, eventually you're going to get mainly the performance degradations and stuff like this. Why not just actually shoot up any patch into the community lab and just get the generic test running on every patch and actually
We do. We
leveraging
already
that.
have a lot of them running on every patch.
And it's appearing where? If you fail, where does it appear, right? Because only
If
if
you go on DPDK Patchwork, you'll see the results of some of the tests, and I think the UNH lab, there's some things about you have to subscribe and whatever to get the results.
There's a dashboard.
Yeah, on the dashboard there, yeah. Talk to somebody who knows more about that lab.
Any other questions or comments? And we can connect to the laughter for the lab. Great, thank you.